Why don't we start with this question? I'm just going to start with a couple, and then I'll get to what you guys have there. Let's talk about this, and I honestly don't mind whoever wants to start us off. We'll start with Mark, actually, since he kind of started this whole thing, right? Mark, what are the you didn't like the pros cons terminology, but the pros and cons, the benefits and challenges, we'll say, the caution points I wrote down of, like, okay, I need to be trained for missions, and maybe formal Bible training is what I need, but I'm just going to do it all online because that's, more economical. That's, easier. Of course, I don't have to move. Do you have any? I know that you're involved in online education, but you probably know about what's out there as well and the different pros and cons. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, pros and cons to online training.
Right.
Yeah, boy, that's a huge field, and we're still learning. When COVID hit, the learning curve went way up, and we had people on our faculty who had never done it, including me, and all of a sudden we're launched into it. So we learned some things really quickly, other things take more time. One of the pros of online teaching is its geographic versatility. You can study anywhere in the world and do it. And you have synchronous classes where you're doing it live. You have asynchronous where you're recording them. I can tell you right off the bat that if you're doing a whole course, I know that for my courses, I recorded an average of about 90 15-minute recordings for one course. That's a lot of recording, and I had colleagues that said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to bypass that altogether. So the preparation is huge. One of the disadvantages of online training is the lack of face-to-face contact with your students. Even if you're doing it synchronously, it's still not the same as being there. Another disadvantage is that students that might normally speak up more freely in a class may feel hesitant to do that just because they're not sure, if somebody else is going to speak up, they're going to interrupt them because they're sitting alone in their room. And so, but those are all barriers that, in my opinion, do not nix the idea of online training. You can beef up the positives, and you can still make it a very good experience. You can get students to do things like discussion posts and things like that where there's interaction in the group. The fact is, some classes lend themselves more to online training than others do. Practical theology type classes are much harder to pull off than content-driven classes like Bible and theology classes. So there's a whole lot more. I don't want to hog all the time, but those are just some thoughts.
As you think about a person that's wanting to get ready to be a missionary, and they're just like, I'm just going to do some online courses while I continue my job, and then hopefully in a few years' time I'll be ready to be sent.
That's
what are some ways that could be just made to be a better training ground, maybe by, for example, the pastor of that person's church or that person's efforts to kind of plan in some exposure to ministry or something? Is there any ways like that you would advise, like a person just like, I'm not planning to move to Bible college and do Bible college, I'm just going to do it all online and then go to be a missionary? What are ways they can kind of...
Is this for me to answer? Because I don't.
Well, you can start it, and then we'll.
I'll just say one thing. It is a great advantage to be able to take an online course when you cannot leave your job, your location, and go somewhere. It's kind of like the old idea of doing courses off-site where a group of pastors in a certain region would get together, something like that. I personal opinion, to try to do all of your preparation for missionary service online is quite limited.
Yeah.
As a package deal. If you're going to do it, if that's your only mode, then I think you're going to be missing out on some key discipleship and mentoring features.
Yeah. Anybody else like to speak to that topic?
Well, the strength of that is being able to still be plugged into your local church, and the church that will then, God willing, send you. You never have to disconnect from them, right? That you do if you have to go to school. But you definitely are missing even the student life part of college that is not just fun and fun. It's also very enriching. I mean, the discussions in the dorm, while at times can be frivolous, they can also be really good too for you to solidify what you believe because you have to say it out loud. And then when somebody challenges you when you say it out loud and you realize, no, that was actually a dumb idea. But you're friends, so you can say dumb ideas and somebody can push back at you. And you're kind of all in this together, learning as you go and learning as you grow. And so you can't underestimate even the value of fellowship with peers. That's a good part of actually being on a college or seminary campus.
Yeah. Steve or Kelly, either one? Kelly's ready.
Yeah, I think you have to start where you are and don't put off starting. So if you need to start with some classes online, do that. But then relationships are super important. And for those of us that are more introverted, we have to be out there. We've got to be with people. Otherwise, it's so easy for us just to be inside of our house or our room and do our studies there and be comfortable with that. So relationships are super important. I'm glad that it was mentioned to, make sure you're real involved in your local church and those type of things.
Good. Anything to add, or shall we move on to the next subject?
I would just add to that my own experience. I finished my Master's of Divinity when I was pastoring, and online classes were not all available. I should say not all the classes were available online. So 75% of them, I traveled from southern Colorado to central Iowa for my Master's of Divinity. The ones week at a time for modules. The ones I could take remotely, I took remotely. And next week, I'm starting a Doctor of Ministry program, which once a semester is going to require me to be in person for a class. The other classes are going to be remote. So there's a lot of value in hybrid options, especially for those that are engaged in life and family and church life that, as Dr. Odell said, don't want to be disconnected from that. And just the options. I think the value in this question is not the awareness that I can do this or I can do that. It's the value of thinking in terms of what can I eliminate as an excuse for future ministry. So I'm thinking about it, but man, I have to go to school, and then there's a whole thing. There's so many options available to you. Do not let the potential challenges of ministry preparation be the excuse that keeps you from responding to the prompting of God to pursue ministry life.
Yeah, great. Why don't you keep the mic, Steve, because this one I think you'll have some experience in your pastoral ministry. So let's switch to the sender now. Okay, the idea of being an effective church, an effective person, holding the ropes. In the topic of biblical literacy, like what are some good practical ways that we can think about investing in our peers, investing in our fellow church members, as well as the younger generation, to help just promote the health of our churches, so that we're seeing more people go and being well equipped, biblically literate, church goers that we can help send. How can we play a role in doing that well?
There's a great podcast available.
I didn't mean to tee that up. Yeah,
called the Send 938 Missions Podcast, a ministry of baptism missions designed to encourage, equip, and inspire the next generation of missionary servants and the churches who will send them.
Plug and play.
So actually, I mentioned that obviously as a plug for that.
It's good.
Which was not planned with Travis, but thanks for the softball. However, I would say that availing yourself to the very broad spectrum of available information. We are living in a world in which information availability is unparalleled. And the idea that somebody would say, well, I just don't know. Learn. You're not limited by what's available to you in terms of knowledge and information. You may have to develop a little bit of discernment to figure out what's valuable and reliable, but availing yourself of the resources that are presented to us in this world is critical to being informed enough to be a help. The person in the local church who's going to be a great help to their church family or their pastoral staff in terms of helping to develop future leaders and missionary servants is going to be the person who has not necessarily all of the experience of having been a missionary on the field somewhere, so they know all the ins and outs of the logistics and dynamics of life lived internationally and ministry conducted that way. But it's going to be the person who has a depth of awareness of missiological trends, opportunities for service, the person who's thinking critically about theological implications related to certain ministry dynamics and how should we as a church think and feel about that? Is this an acceptable model that we would be welcoming and incorporating into our missionary program? Is there something, oh boy, this missionary showed up and somebody in the church seems really enthused about what they're doing, but I think I have some concerns about that because I'm aware that this is a program that is associated with whatever you want, fill in the blank. So the person who is informed and engaged in that information processing is going to be, apart from experience, is going to be a valuable asset to your local church in developing a sending mentality. What can we do to do more? And I'm going to avail myself of that knowledge as it's available to me in the world.
Coming to things like advanced seminar and listening to the podcast. Yeah.
I don't know. I would say anything distinct from what you've said.
Anybody, Kelly or still Mark? Yeah. Yeah, I think I can tell this story carefully, but what you were saying reminded me of a friend that we recently met that some of us will remember, a faithful lady that was serving in her church that, is considering involvement with Baptist missions in various leadership capacities, who just has read a lot of books and informed herself of mission trends and like certain books that none of us have ever read. Is like, wow, this lady knows what she's talking about.
It's somebody that we've engaged about serving on our council.
Yeah.
And I started just conversing with her, and she's had a life of accounting and senior executive counting at the corporate level, and started talking about missions. And I realized this lady's read more missions books than I have. This is really amazing, and helped their church develop as a person in the pew an entire philosophy of missions that resulted in a missions handbook for their church. And it's really good. I got a chance to look at it. And so you don't have to be a missionary to really think missiologically, and that's New Testament, really.
Yeah. Good.
So yeah, good example.
All right, let's turn to you guys. What questions do you have? Oh, Jeannie's got, just kidding. She happened to itch her head at that moment. So what questions have come to mind? And maybe they're not even close to these two that we've started with, but yeah, just feel free. We'd love to hear from you. Of course, it always takes that first one. I was going to say, Caleb, I bet, has a question. I appreciate it. I love it.
What do you guys say when, like, a guy's pursuing maybe pastoral ministry or something, and he kind of talks about how he doesn't really feel like he needs that extra training? Like, I know we talked about biblical literacy, but I know some guys, they're like, I want to go into this, but I don't feel like I need that extra training. Like, how can you, like, what are some of the benefits you think, like, besides just knowledge, that you think are important to kind of discuss, and why, if a guy's considering, like, ministry, or anyone really, to get that extra education?
I know for me, I graduated super eager to get into pastoral ministry, especially youth pastoral ministry. And so I was like, done. Bachelor's degree, I'm done, I'm good. And probably wasn't a year into ministry and went, wow, I need more. I'm so dumb. I'm not done, I'm dumb. And so immediately then, enrolled in seminary, realizing there was so much more. So sometimes it's a matter of you don't know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it. And so it's okay for there to be a gap, even where you go along and you learn whatever at whatever level. Maybe it's an associate's degree, maybe it's a bachelor's degree, maybe it's not a degree at all. Maybe it's just I'm really, really plugging in to my local church and being mentored by someone in the church, or even the pastor or pastor's wife. But just don't stop altogether. And you'll find yourself, I think, getting thirstier when you realize that there's just so much more. And sometimes it takes real life to show that to you.
My first response to that is anyone who is so eager to get into something that they feel like they don't need more preparation, particularly with pastoral ministry, is probably not considering well the charge or expectation in Scripture that the shepherd who has been given the charge of someone else's soul care is going to be held accountable one day for that. And I entered pastoral ministry when I was 25, and I can confidently say I had a church that knew how to be a church when they had a pastor that didn't know how to pastor, and I'm grateful for that. But it took several years for me to really get to a place where I felt like the things I was doing at the pastoral level was representative of a genuine interest in shepherding souls rather than just fulfilling responsibilities. And so the spiritual accountability for pastoral ministry, and I would say not every missionary serves as a pastor, but especially for those who would be church planting missionaries, pastoral role in a new church plant, that's a really serious charge, and you're going to have to give an account for it one day. So, what have you done to prepare yourself? I mean, there's a reason that the expectation for pastoral ministry in the New Testament is that they would not be a novice. And that's going to demand not just training, but experience. So what's the experiential training that you have that has prepared you for the task at hand? And some of that can come through an educational system. I think we've highlighted this several times tonight, so I'll say it again. You can't eliminate the responsibility of the local church in raising up leaders. Pastors don't come from seminaries, they come from churches. Missionaries don't come from schools, they come from churches. We are downstream of everything that's happening in the church. So,
Right. All right, another question? Well, why don't we get the mic on the other half there? We appreciate you first two guys, but we like these Brazilian guys too. John, unless you have a question for Steve or Patrick.
Before you do something within your leadership roles that you guys have had, what is something that's, you're just about to go into something, whether it's discipleship, podcast, anything. What does your prayer look like personally? Like, I know it's different with everything, but is there a base way that you approach prayer right before you get into a ministry situation?
So, for example, when Mark was talking about that angst that he felt of this decision to leave Brazil and go teach, is that what you mean? Or you mean preaching a sermon or witnessing to somebody?
I've just found it to be the difference in my life if I'm praying before I do something.
Sure.
I'm just kind of, it's good. Wondering what it looks like for you guys, your prayer life before something's about to happen, something's going down.
I have to look at my wife here to make sure that I'm answering correctly or honestly, but because my prayer life could always improve. But I don't think, looking back, that my prayer has been different before decisions than before those decisions were in my view. My prayer has been constant. And I'm a little different, maybe, I see myself, than these three. I'm the missionary that was a missionary because of God's grace, not because of ability, not because I had it all together. I had to learn as I served and was always playing catch up and never caught up. But I was constantly in prayer, wanting to serve the Lord where He wanted me. And one thing that we found as a couple, I think, and then single as I look back before our marriage, that when you desire to do what God wants you to do, and when you're pursuing Him on a daily, hourly basis, and you know that He's sovereign, you know that He's in control of your life, then He guides you and gives you joy and peace and understanding and courage as you take those steps. So sorry, prayer life not much different from one moment to the next. Always could be better, but constantly as I move through life.
There are two passages of Scripture that in the last decade or so God has really impressed upon me relative to trusting Him in prayer. And that's Philippians 4 and Hebrews 4. I'm a worrywart by nature. I'm sure there's nobody else in this room that struggles with that. I wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, sometimes worrying about something I forgot to do or have to do tomorrow. Okay, if anybody else, maybe you don't worry at night. Maybe you don't worry I have a colleague that says, I worry when I get up. When I wake up in the morning and get up, that's when I start worrying. And God really impressed on me Philippians 4, 6, and 7, in everything by prayer and supplication. And then that key phrase, with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God. So when I wake up and I'm worrying about something, I have trained my mind, and it actually is working now after several years of training. The first thing that comes out of my mouth and out of my heart is, Lord, thank you. And I'll think of something to thank Him for. And even if it's relating to what I'm worrying about, Lord, thank you that you can do this even though I can't. And Then Hebrews chapter 4 is the other one. We don't approach a throne of merit. We don't get there because we've earned our way there. It's a throne of grace, and we're there to find two things: mercy and grace for well-timed help. And just real quickly, that little word help there is only used one other time as a noun in the New Testament, and that's in Acts 27 when Paul's on his way by boat, and there's a storm, and they put these straps around the boat and tie it together in order to hold the boat together. And that word for cables is the same word he uses in Hebrews 4 for help. And so when you're on the high seas and your boat is coming apart, you go to the throne of grace. You say, God, I need those cables to hold me together. And God has used those two references so many, 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 many times to see me through when I thought it was all over.
Very, very helpful. Great question.
Two passages that have probably been the most common ones that I have gone to in my prayer life, especially in anticipation of ministry opportunities. And so Sunday, before a Sunday preaching opportunity, I'm always reminded of John 15, where Jesus said, without me, you can do nothing. And that means nothing, absolutely nothing. And so I can't do anything without the Lord Jesus. And so to ask him to make something out of this nothing, because that's me, I'm nothing. And so to use me in that way. So please, Lord, do something through nothing, because I'm nothing. And then the other one is, and this would be more in just different life situations, constantly praying James 1. If you lack wisdom, let anyone who lacks wisdom ask of God, who gives to all men generously. And so, Lord, man, I need a lot of wisdom. Every day I need wisdom. So that's probably the other most common thing that I find myself praying is, Lord, give me wisdom.
Yeah, I was going to mention James 1 as well, because for me, it's not a, Lord, tell me what to do. It's always give me wisdom. And just, if you don't know me, you may, if you know me, you probably recognize this. I have a inflated sense of self-ability. I'm very confident about myself, and so that lends itself to just saying, wow, I can do this. It's gonna be fine. And so I really have to force myself to step back and remind myself, I should remember John 15. That's gonna be the one that goes in the back pocket for me tonight. But remind myself, actually, you're not that capable. You've just stumbled your way through mercifully by God's grace. And so the reminder that I need God's wisdom, the last couple of months, I would say every night when Joy and I pray, that's been part of my prayer for our family, for me with raising two daughters. God, give me wisdom, give me wisdom, give me wisdom.
Two teenage
I always said I'd rather have two girls I was responsible for protecting than two boys I was responsible for apologizing for. I find myself doing a lot of apologizing these days, though.
Good. I love that question, John. I appreciate it. Other questions? I don't mean to avoid this side over here. Wave at me strongly if I'm missing you. Yeah, Jen?
How can we encourage biblical literacy in those that don't see the need for it and have zero desire to pursue it, even though they state that they're believers? How, just like a couple bullet point thoughts of how can we encourage that? What can we say to help them realize, no, you should be pursuing biblical literacy?
Great question.
Try to connect them with people that can help them to understand that through experience. Just like understanding that you need more training as a pastor, I would say find people that have been there and done that can help them understand that. I would say another, and I would say this carefully, pray that God would put them in situations where they have no choice but to see that. I'm not asking for imprecatory prayers, but that God would place them in circumstances where what you're telling them comes to be real because of what they're facing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think of Jeff Newman right away, because I've heard him say things like this, that when life squeezes you, the difficulties of life, what comes out of you then is evidence of what is either there or what's lacking. And so it may be those types of circumstances of life that they're responding in unbiblical ways, that you as a friend could come alongside of them and help them see the truths of Scripture that are lacking in their heart and life. And maybe that will then give them a hunger for how to really change biblically. In scriptural literacy, biblical literacy is part of that, because if the Word of God is not in here, then it's going to come out in how they respond in life. So they might get squeezed by difficult circumstances to help them realize it.
Remember the old V8 commercials? Could have had a V8 slap in the forehead. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Well, for those of you who remember, it's a great analogy. That's like that knock them in the forehead kind of thing. Yeah. I think relationally, the people that you're probably concerned about most are the people that are closest to you. I'm assuming you're not concerned about some stranger's biblical literacy. I mean, at an experiential level, you're not really that. That's probably not the thing that's on your heart. It's the family members or the people sitting next to you in church. And so, those people ought to be the ones that realistically you're capable of just going to as a brother or sister and saying, listen, tell me I'm wrong, but it seems to me that you don't really have a thoroughly biblical view of what's going on here. And that kind of concerns me, because this maybe should be like a base level understanding that you seem to be missing. So can you help me understand where you're arriving at your, provocation for this decision or justification for that idea, and would you be willing to let me kind of contend with you a little bit on what I think I'm seeing, and can we walk through this together? So confrontation is what I'm saying, but not being confrontational, just being engaged and loving about it.
Cherry on top, I would just say it's also a mandate or a challenge to you to live biblically and to demonstrate your own biblical convictions in front of that person. So other questions? Kelly?
Kind of piggybacking off of that, do you think that for somebody who claims to be a believer is constantly like kind of nipping at your heels, like, why are you choosing missions? Why are you choosing missions? Do you think that there comes a point where you just have to like stop trying to share with them because they're not getting it? Or do you think that it's still something to explain to them over and over again, especially if it's somebody who's close to you, like family or friends, who is still very involved in your life, but might not necessarily agree with your decision to choose missions?
I've been really surprised over the last 4 years in my role here with the mission at the number of times that I've been made aware of or actually been party to a conversation with a parent talking to their child about their future ministry endeavors, and the parent being the one discouraging the child from participating. You need to find a real job. Is missions even something they can make a living doing? Are they just going to be destitute their whole life? Is this what you're signing up for this? So I think at some point there needs to be some clarity about what it is you're actually doing. So I'm actually pursuing a life of ministry that has eternal value. And I genuinely believe there isn't anything greater that I could be doing with the gifts and talents God's given me than putting them into His service. And I think when you get to that level where you just put it, where it's, I believe this is me, I have this opportunity. I mean, if somebody wants to really continue to argue with you, they're just arguing with your experience on this matter, not at a philosophical level. Why would anyone do ministry? That's not a question that you might be able to convince them of, but your own testimony of your pursuit, it just needs to be the thing that it's laid down over and over. I had one friend recently ask me why I do some of the things I do. And I told him, I said, I go where I go. And this is when I was going into South Central Asia and some creative access areas. And what are you doing? You have a family at home. I said, well, as hard as this may be to believe, I actually believe that what God's called me to do is something of eternal consequence. And I'm putting my family in his hands while I'm here, because this is something that I've been given the opportunity to do, and I think it's worth doing. So I'm pursuing it. So.
Okay, I'm assuming that you're talking about a believer who's challenging this. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, we believe in the centrality of the local church, in the call to missions, and in sending out missionaries. So I would ask you, first of all, you don't have to answer it. I would ask anybody who's asking this question, does your church recognize God's direction to missions in your life? Because in Acts chapter 4, Acts chapter 13, it was the local church that sent those people. So you're looking for a backing, you're looking for a confirmation, you're looking for something to say. If your church recognizes that and is engaged in this endeavor, then you have a backing there that's very strong. And the second thing I would tell you is you don't have to try to convince somebody of something that you're sensing inside. Okay, they're just not going to. And there is a subjective element to sensing God's direction that you cannot objectify, and you shouldn't have to. But if your church is behind you and they recognize the call of God, then I think you have something very biblical to go on.
That's great. A couple of practical thoughts on that. One, make sure that you don't forget the person on the other side, their feelings. I went to Brazil with my wife, 4 children. My mom cried. She didn't stop us from going, didn't say we shouldn't go, but I should have been more understanding of what she was feeling when we took her grandkids to Brazil. So have some empathy and think of what they might be feeling. And maybe if you show some love to them and understanding, then they'll also relax in their opinion of or thoughts of your decision. The other thing is bring them here to the home office. I was in Brazil for almost 30 years, didn't come here to the home office very often, and I've had to ask these guys forgiveness for not coming here to the home office, not building that relationship, not keeping it active. There's a group of young people, of course most people are younger than me now except for Mark, but there is a group of people here that are super capable, super intelligent. They know what they're doing, and yet they're very humble. I've seen some very outgoing missionaries and leaders in missions that just looked amazing, but they didn't have the humble factor. And the guys and ladies that are working here at the office have both of those things. And I think you've seen that already tonight. So if you come in contact with somebody that's saying, I just don't think that's the best option, and you can make a lot more money somewhere else or whatever, be safer somewhere else, bring them here. Have them go on a tour here and meet some of these folks, except maybe Steve. But the rest, meet the rest, and that could change their mind a little bit.
That's great. I don't know that this is a family member, but if it is a family member, one of the things that Mark said made me think about this in terms of your prayer for them and how you pray for them, that you would pray that they would come to a place of surrender like you have, where you were willing to follow the Lord into missions, that they would be willing to give up, if it's a family member, their daughter or their granddaughter or their niece or whoever, in the same way, because that is a surrender, that is a taking up your cross, forsaking all, and following Jesus type of matter for them that just looks different from those who stay. And sometimes that's can be just as hard if they're the ones giving up the ones who go.